Hi, this is Melissa Manchester, and you lucky people, are listening to TV Confidential.
SCTV's Movie of the Week, the uplifting story of one of baseball's immortals, the Babe Ruth story.
Bobby, guess who's here to see you? Babe Ruth.
Hiya, kiddo.
Hi, babe.
Say, kiddo, you're gonna be all right. Don't you worry about it.
Thanks, babe.
Ed
I
Robertson
got a
welcoming
game
you
this
back
afternoon, kiddo,
to
and I want you to listen to it.
TV
Somebody
Confidential
hit a
Radio
home
Talk Show
run
about
just for you.
television. This coming Friday,
right.
October
Home run
31st,
ready
is
to
not
center
only
field.
Halloween,
Gee, babe.
but a date that will mark the 75th anniversary
For me?
of the birth of John Candy. John Candy, the force of nature from Toronto, Canada, who rose to fame in sketch comedy with the Toronto branch of Second City before becoming a breakout star, first on television with SCTV, then in the movies with his memorable performances in The Blues Brothers, Uncle Buck, JFK, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and many, many others. John Candy's life was tragically cut short when he died of a heart attack in April 1994 at the age of 43. Joining us now is Paul Myers. Paul's latest book, John Candy, A Life in Comedy, takes a deep dive into the life and times of the man who captivated audiences with his self-deprecating humor, his emotional warmth, and his gift for improvisation. We'll tell you more about Paul's book in just a second. We'll also tell you about the many events that are lined up throughout the rest of October and into early November. Paul has several events in Canada as well as in the New York City area. In the meantime, we began our conversation, Paul and I did, by bonding over our roots in the San Francisco Bay Area. Matter of fact, Paul and I lived in the same neighborhood in Berkeley, California, although not at the same time. As we pick up the conversation, we said to Paul, I was delighted to find out, to learn a little bit about your Bay Area roots.
Yeah, I need to say that I'm a Canadian-born, but California convert, like Northern California specifically, I think.
Yeah.
And I've actually recently wrote an essay for another book, someone else's compilation about having this split identity of being I call it Canadian-Bornian. And it's you know, in this time in America, it's a very interesting thing to talk about what parts of America you still feel good in.
Yes.
And like that's as much as I should say about that. But
Yeah.
you know, and especially for a Canadian, when you've had the Canadian mindset and you're also acclimated and, let's say, assimilated to California, especially Northern California, where it's really a vibe, you know, its own vibe. And
Yes.
there's all kinds of vibes, mind you, but there's a vibe here that I'm fine with, you know.
Yeah, well, look, I've been in Los Angeles for about 15 years, so technically that makes me a native now. But one of the things that it took me a while to come to grips with was the culture shock from someone who lived and grew up in the Bay Area all my life and had a certain perception about what LA is and who LA people are. And while there is a vibe of its own in LA, it's not the same as San Francisco. And so I consider myself a San Franciscan who happens to be living in LA right now.
Well, some of my favorite people are the kinds of people who hang out and play at the Largo at the Coronet Theater.
Uh-huh.
And so there's this sort of side to Los Angeles to me that's a very creative community. And a lot of my favorite musicians and comedians are, you know, LA people. So
Yeah.
There's a definitely, if I was to move there, that's the world I would probably want to hang out in.
Yeah. I mean, it's like
Enough
all,
about that.
No, enough about that. I'm about 2/3 of the way through your book. I'm enjoying it very, very, very much.
Well, thank you so much. And our mutual friend Robert Crane, helped me immensely in helping me ground much of the story in factual, anecdotal background, as well as some of the other interviews that corroborate the stories. And, you know, so I felt like I had a responsibility to all the close friends of John Candy and, you know, people who'd worked with him to really bear witness to their witness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had no agenda. The only question that I wanted to ask was, what was it about this guy that made so many people feel the loss personally, even if they didn't know him? And also, what was it that made him great and people still talk about either his work or his exchanges they had with him. And I hope that readers, by the end of it, feel all of those things. And that's my responsibility. And I'm satisfied that I told something. The question will be now, hopefully everyone enjoys it.
Well, I'm only one reader, but when I don't do my show, Bob may have told you this, when I don't do my show, I write and edit books for a living. So I like to think I have a pretty good feel about how readers, both professional readers and, Joe and Jane public, will respond to certain things. I mean, I think you check both those boxes.
Well, thank you. And again, we don't do this without editors. And Douglas Richmond at House of Anansi Press really worked with me. My first overlong draft had to be condensed, and sometimes I would go off on meandering tangents because you know how it is.
Yeah.
You get interested. You get interested in a tangent, especially because I have ADHD. And I would write a whole 2 chapters on the history of the Second City Theater in Chicago, thinking that it would be useful for the reader to know. And then Douglas, had this great sense to say, is there a way you can do that in more than, less, definitely not a whole chapter, and find a way to keep it focused on John and keep it focused on your main character arc. And so that's what I do. Is I think that's what the narrative flow is. You can get information from the internet,
Mm-hmm.
but books aren't. I think biographies, and if I may, good biographies, they're about the story, or maybe a story. They're about telling, bringing you on a journey through that, and maybe, hopefully, oh my God, this is an ambitious act, make people feel it.
Yeah.
Because that would be like a good song, like you want people to go, clever words, but I don't even want them to think about that I said words. I want them to just think that they were taken there. And that's where fiction and nonfiction, I think, have a lot in common. It's like, you want, one of the best books on writing for me was Stephen King.
Yes.
And it's a nonfiction book,
Mm-hmm.
but because he's so skilled, he took you through his process to the point where, you're reading a story, and it's as gripping as any suspense novel.
Yeah, the biggest takeaway, and we'll get back to John Candy in just a second, folks. But
Sure.
The biggest, I've never been a reader of Stephen King novels, but like you, I love his book on writing. And when I was in my formative years as a writer, he used to write for Writer's Digest and a lot of these how-to magazines that were intended to share the craft of writing to people who wanted to pursue that. But the one thing he said that resonated with me in my early years, Paul, was at the end of the day, nothing works in a vacuum. You have to get your butt in the chair and do the work, and don't worry about whether it's good or not, because chances are, if it's your first draft, it's not going to be good. But you need to get the not good stuff out on paper first, so then you can, pare it down to the essence to what makes it good. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, I agree with you. And that was one of the great liberating things I learned maybe later in life. I mean, I wish I'd learned it in my 20s when you think you're supposed to be a genius out of the gate. One of the things I learned is that almost nobody gets it right the first time.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's a curse if you do, because you never know why or how you did it. And, they call it the School of Hard Knocks for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that recognizing that you won't get it right, but that you can write a way too long first draft, or an over long draft, and you can, as long as you know that when you go back in, you're going to be eliminating all the baggage. You're going to be also cutting out that clever word thing that you wanted to use, that big $1 million word you wanted to use,
Mm-hmm.
because you realized that you were just trying to show somebody that you knew big words.
Yes.
With my wife, who was in books, she started in the publishing business, and she said that one of the things that she loved about New Yorker was people think it's a literary, very smart magazine, but you can read any story in the New Yorker, and you don't have to have a thesaurus. Most of the time they're aiming it at telling the story and not showing you that the writer can flex their muscle.
Exactly.
But that's a side note, yeah. But I would say that one of the things I loved about telling John Candy's story, to bring it back, which is, one of the things I loved is that I wrote it now and not when I was starting out. And I've done 4 other biographies before this, to the point where if I can say anything, I can say that at least I've been in school for 20 years, over 20 years. And so I'm happy that a subject like Candy, who is worthy of everything that I think I've learned,
Yes.
I was now in a position to feel like, even when my first draft was too long, I was like, here before, we'll get to the heart of this. We will make this book lean, concise, and hopefully lively, all those things. And I just want to be like, I think my job is to be the guide. You know, I'm your friendly tour guide through the life and work of John Candy. And again, if I've done my job, you should not even think of me.
Yes, and I can honestly say to you, Paul, and to our listeners, you did your job. It is absorbing.
I appreciate that.
It's a big book about a big man that warrants the length, and yet it reads quickly, which is the best compliment of all.
Well, that means so much to me because, as you know, people write these books in darkness, and you're spending a lot of time alone. You know, there's a social part where you're doing the interviews and then doing the research alone and doing all the back, corroboration and all the fact checking, and then there's that moment where it's just you and the manuscript and you're fighting it out.
Yep.
And and to learn that it landed in a reader's, especially someone like you. You say you've got experience in that. It just means the world to me. So thank you.
On the line with us is Paul Myers. Paul's latest book, John Candy, A Life in Comedy, tells the full story of the man behind the laughter, the people who knew John Candy best, including such close friends and colleagues as Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, Tom Hanks, Ron Howard, Steve Martin, Catherine O'Hara, Dave Thomas, Joe Flaherty, Andrea Martin, Martin Short, Jennifer Candy, John Hughes III, James Hughes, Paul's brother Mike Myers, and our friend Robert Crane. John Candy, A Life in Comedy, available right now wherever books are sold through House of Anansi Press, houseofanansi.com, as well as Amazon.com, where books are sold online. Paul Myers has several appearances coming up, both in the U.S. and in Canada, over the next several weeks, including U.S. appearances in Berkeley, San Francisco, Portland, and New York City. For details and more information, go to houseofanansi.com and type in John Candy, A Life in Comedy book tour.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back.
One more item. If you're starting a company, particularly one that is in an emerging market, you know that averting any sort of legal dispute is crucial to your business plan. Our friends at Tectonic Law offer an array of services that can help you avoid and preempt future litigation while also developing and protecting your intellectual property and intangible assets. Tectonic Law serves the needs of a host of emerging industries throughout California and beyond, including industrial designers, beverage makers, artists, farmers, retail stores, health practitioners, wellness experts, cosmetics manufacturers, nonprofit organizations, innovators in sustainable practices, and libraries. Go to tectoniclaw.com to learn more about how Tectonic Law can help your business thrive. tectoniclaw.com. Rock solid representation for groundbreaking industries.
This portion of TV Confidential is brought to us by our friends at Front Porch Realty, the community of realtors in the Northern Bay area of California that is committed to finding the solution that is best for their clients. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or looking to sell or lease your property in Northern California, call Karen Strain at 415-886-7411 or visit frontporchrealtygroup.com for more information on how they can help you.
Ed Robertson, thanking you for listening to the TV Confidential podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button so that you won't miss our next episode.
Hi, this is Kevin Pollak, and you're listening to TV Confidential.
This is it, folks. This is what it's all about. One game. There is no tomorrow. This is for the whole Magilla, for the whole ball of wax, for the whole kit and caboodle, for the whole enchilada, the whole shooting match. This is for all the marbles. The division championship. The loser goes home a loser. The winner moves on to the World Series. can't believe it. I've been waiting my whole life to say those words, you know, because I've said the word before, but never like World Series, and I'm on the air. We'll be right back.
I have 3 or 4 takeaways from reading your book, Paul. I'd like to start with those and then branch out into some of the specific movies and TV things that he did. Number 1, like all human beings, John Candy was a walking contradiction. He was a bear of a man on the outside, but very sensitive on the inside. And one of the things I was not aware of and that I learned as a result of John Candy, A Life in Comedy, is he was comfortable in his own skin, but he wasn't always comfortable with his girth.
I would say that it's also not that he was self-conscious about his size. But I don't think the media landscape of the 80s and 90s helped him much in that regard, because I think society's done a lot better job since, and still hasn't gotten better 100%. But there were people who would tell him to his face in the middle of an interview that he was a fat guy.
Yeah.
And you know, and when he saw himself on those bus wraps where they showed that they wrapped the side of the bus with a picture of the actor, and where he saw himself on an 8-foot cinema screen. I think he was kind of aware, you know, and inside he's you know, a swashbuckling, charming man, but people would pigeonhole him or try to cast him in the role of the comedian Fatty Arbuckle, which was like a little too on the nose for everybody. You know, and he just would, you know, he walked out of productions if they advertised him as just being a big man, and you know, like he would say, you know, don't do that. But he also was so much of a person who wanted to make everyone happy that he would test the limits of his own, what he could take. Like, so he would accept working in a scene where the joke was that a large man is mud wrestling with bikini-clad women in stripes. But he would be stewing about it. Like, he would be internalizing it, and his friends would notice it. His friends like Dave Thomas and Joe Flaherty, who were on that movie, noticed that he was doing it sort of under duress, you know, and so those kinds of battles were constantly going on, and because he was such a people pleaser, I think he didn't let on to a lot of people just how much it hurt him, and that's based on my, you know, anecdotal talking to people about it and what things he said, coded messages he would say in interviews where he sort of implied that, and it had to be, all I can speculate on is that it had to be hard on him. Yeah.
It had to be hard on him, and yet, going back to, you know, your overriding question as you embarked on this journey, Paul, what was it about this man that everybody seemed to connect to? You know, one of my takeaways as you explore that in John Candy, A Life in Comedy, is that it connected him to me as a person in a way I hadn't felt before. And it humanizes him and makes him more relatable.
Yeah. I think that's true. Yeah. I appreciate that you got that. That was my goal, is to try and create a situation where you could just watch and maybe draw your own conclusions, because I always tell people, I'm not Dr. Paul Myers. My job isn't to analyze anyone, especially from beyond. Like, he passed away 31 years ago, so there's no way I'm going to get him to tell me. So now we just have to do an investigation and talk to as many people who could bear witness to it, as well as things he said himself contemporaneously during his life. And so I feel, again, my solemn duty was to try not to create a judgment or a diagnosis. And I'm glad that you felt something from what I wrote, because I was feeling it. As I was writing it, I was feeling a lot of empathy for this guy, and learning a lot about, as nice as he seemed to everyone else, he was actually even more sensitive and more generous and more giving. And sometimes people took, and he stood up for himself when he had to, and he stood up for others. It's amazing that he stood up for small injustices and large injustices. He always quickly noticed when somebody else was getting a bad deal.
We'll pick up that thread on the other side of the break. Paul Myers is on the line with us. Paul's latest book, John Candy, A Life in Comedy, available in bookstores everywhere through houseofanansi.com as well as Amazon.com. Take a quick time out. Talk some more with Paul. We come back here on TV Confidential.